Very good, thank you. Welcome, everyone, to the January 17th meeting of the Housing and Redevelopment Authority. I am going to call the meeting to order and confirm that we have a quorum. Commissioner Olson will be absent but excused, as he pre-informed us. All right, first thing on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Any additions or updates?
The only thing, I don't know where to put it, but there's one item that I wanted to report back on from the last month where we talked about the energy efficiency. That can go.
Should we?
There we go. Okay, no change.
Under commissioner items?
The commissioner items, yes.
Okay. Then, motion to approve,
I'll move to approve.
and a second.
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Carries unanimously, 4-0. Approval of the December 2023 meeting minutes.
I'll move approval, but I have a question on the item that talks about the salt situation.
Or sand.
Sand?
Or sand, excuse me, sand situation. I thought the idea was there's insufficient demand to spend $1 million investing in a plant or a operation here, and it says sufficient demand. There is sufficient demand. But I think you meant
Good catch, Commissioner. I think my brain ran out of juice at the moment, I'm assuming. Can you indicate where that is exactly on the?
Here, insufficient demand, letter X.
X. There we go. Okay, thank you. I will make that change.
Well, if I'd have written it, it would have said salt. So now we're even.
Fair enough. Thank you again. I'll make that change.
All right, a motion to approve the minutes as amended by Gabler.
And I'll second.
Second, O'Brien. Any further discussion? Any other comments or questions on the minutes? Hearing none, all those signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right.
Motion carries 4-0. The next item is public comment. I don't see any public, so I think there won't be any comment. Then, moving right along, we'll let the record show that EDA Executive Director Teresa Bida is in the building, but she's not here for public comment, so.
She missed her opportunity, Chair.
Yeah, right. Okay, new business, Resolution 24-1, authorizing, 24-1, ooh, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Authorizing the Executive Director to apply for grant funds up to $300,000 from IRRR for assisting construction of new single-family homes in the city of Grand Marais. Jason.
Chair, this shouldn't be a surprise to any of the commissioners. We've been talking about this project for a while. This is the Bjorkberg project. The EDA yesterday at its meeting approved applying for these funds. I did have a call today with IRRR about various things, and I'll touch on that a little bit later. But at least for now, the EDA is still the funnel through which all county and county jurisdiction, all applications to IRRR go. So this is to support the infrastructure for that project, which right now is estimated about $900,000, give or take. So this is to help, obviously, literally get things in the ground. And I am working with them. There will be this, like every other, one of these types of applications, authorizes us to apply, and then we will have a development agreement that we would enter into with this developer if we're awarded these funds. So there will be stipulations, one of which includes reserving a number of the lots for either Minnesota housing funding houses to make them affordable for lower income households, or I'm also talking with one rep about community land trust opportunities. So the point is, this is sort of a trade-off deal here that we're working on. Is we'll help apply for these funds if awarded. In exchange, they reserve some of these homes for low to moderate income households. But we won't know any of that unless we can apply for the money.
And you said this is the Bjorkberg?
Bjorkberg, yep.
Yep.
So you said, I'm sorry, the
Sure.
infrastructure cost is estimated at 900,
Correct.
and the gap is
600.
440.
At least 440, correct.
So if the IRRR, is it a dollar for dollar match?
This one is, yes.
And I'm not questioning the rationale, but curious, why would we ask for 300 and not 450, which is half of the infrastructure cost?
Great question, Chair. Two reasons. One is because we're going to have at least one other application on this round,
Yep.
so we have to be cognizant of the amount of money we ask for.
Yeah.
The other reason is because we're not always trying to cover the entirety of the costs. We're trying to cover the gap.
Yeah.
And so far in the pro forma, that's the amount that's been identified. And actually, I put the 440 in there in particular because one of the resources, if we're awarded these funds, one of the other resources that we'll be asked to provide is grant dollars from the HRA, which I have reserved from ARPA money
Okay.
to help with that match.
I
Does that make
figured
sense?
you would have a plan.
It's a puzzle, Chair. But
Yep, understand. Okay, very good, just curious.
any other questions about this? Okay.
All right. If there are no other questions, I would entertain a motion to approve Resolution 24-1.
I'll move approval.
And a second? O'Brien?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Otherwise, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0. Resolution 24-2, authorizing the executive director to enter into a land sale agreement with the EDA for the acquisition of property in Cedar Grove.
Yes, for the steep price of $1, you said, Commissioner.
Of the dollar, yeah.
Correct, yeah. So, Chair, again, this is a situation everybody's familiar with. As you indicated, Director Bida from the EDA is here with us. If we have any questions, thank you for being here. I know you just enjoyed coming, so I appreciate that. We are still working on a couple of items surrounding the covenants of the property with regard to the business park as a whole, but we have a wetland delineation done for the site, and I am working on a couple of different potential projects on the site, and the EDA has already approved this land sale agreement, so this is the last sort of formal step to button that up. Yesterday, and I'll just skip down to Romanet 2 here, II, we have drafted an MOU, which I believe was attached to this as well. There's one change to that the EDA requested, and I figured that the board would be fine with. That change is just to indicate that instead of 4 total units in the property, we are committing to at least 2 on the northern small parcel and at least 4 on the southern parcel. Just to make it clear, the idea here is that there's at least 2 houses on both sites, and we're going to try to bring some level of density. I feel comfortable with that, but I wanted to make sure that you were okay with that, and if so, I'll make that amendment.
Yep.
Okay.
I'll move passage of an adoption of Resolution 24-2.
And a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Gabler, any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 And as Jason indicated, I don't believe we're going to complete this conveyance until the EDA has updated the covenants that are applicable to the business park. Correct?
Yes, so, thank you, Chair. I hope to have signatures. We need at least 75% of lot owners to sign off on the amended and restated declaration of covenants. Hopefully that wraps up so that we can go to the EDA board, hold our hearing in March, get it approved, get it recorded, and then sign the land sale and maybe close in March, early April.
And just so the board knows, this is sort of the linchpin, because now that we have the formal approval to go ahead and acquire the property, now we can have more earnest conversations with folks. And now it's more of a housekeeping and formatting issue. So if, with the board's approval, we can actually start digging in. And it's not so important, to the director's point, we don't need to close tomorrow. Property work, it wouldn't start until May probably anyway, so we have a little bit of time.
Perfect. Very good. All right, the next up on the agenda is under new business, still Switchback Village funding gap assistance. Jason.
Yes, Chair. I brought this up to the board in November, I think, October something. Concrete costs. I think that That was not a surprise. What it has been a surprise is that other costs, as they've drilled in even more, have gone up, is probably not surprising. In fact, the EDA board talked about this yesterday with other projects in town. Every project that I am aware of is running into this problem right now. From the charter school to Switchback to other projects I am working on, and I'll touch on the Tofty project here in a minute. So they've identified a gap. It's about $800,000. And that's, again, I'm not terribly surprised. I was really pleasantly surprised that we didn't have to ask for tax abatement or TIF, and so are they. And we're not going to. And in a way to avoid that, we're exploring 3 concurrent paths. One of which, as the agenda indicates, would be a grant from the HRA, which I had already talked to the board about this to help make up that cost this fall. The second piece would be a loan through the EDA, and Director Bida talked about this with the board yesterday at the EDA meeting. They were receptive to this and supportive of it. Now, of course, there's the papering up of this. It would be a $200,000 basically construction loan. And then the third piece is the county revolving loan fund that the developer would go to directly and request. I think the maximum amount's $250,000 or so. So the issue here, of course, grant money is always the best money for developers if they can get it. But the real issue here is they will, with those funds, let's say the HRA grant, let's say it's $50,000. EDA loan at 200, and then 250 from the county revolving loan fund. That's 500 total. The developer will make the difference up. It's about $250,000 or $300,000 with equity. The issue is, this is just sort of universal with project funding, is if you increase the equity by too much, then the returns diminish for the existing investors, and they're not so happy about that because they're signing up to this project for a specific return amount. So that's why they reached out and said, hey, we'll even take, loan funds, gap loan funds. The project pro forma supports it. It's just right now with loan to values from lenders at about 65%, there's just a bigger gap than there has been historically at 75 or sometimes 80. So I want to put that on your radar to get a general temperature gauge. Again, the Director Bida brought it up. The EDA was very supportive of providing I believe it would be a 3-year, 2% loan to get through construction. Then we paid off the permanent financing, and then we would propose a grant and then support their application for the RLF. Any questions about that?
Seems Wonderoof is getting used to this kind of thing between the Lutzen project and now this
It's
one.
not one roof. This is Switchback.
This is the,
Oh, sorry.
but they are also getting used to
But
this.
one
sort of
roof
thing.
is also, yeah.
Unfortunately. Everyone is, unfortunately. It's the new
Yeah.
building environment.
Yeah.
So if the board understands, sorry, Commissioner, you have a question?
Just walk me through what how the HRA grant would impact our budget.
So Commissioner, it shouldn't, for 2 reasons. One of which, we've still been grateful and fortunate to receive formerly the 1%, now we're rebranding the Cook County Housing Initiative. CVRs continue to have those payments, or send those payments to us. Also, we had received $50,000 project development allotment in our levy. So with a combination of a couple different sources that we have, we can cover that $50,000 grant cap. It's unfortunate, I don't want to use up all of our money out the gate, but you have one in the hand versus 2 in the bush, and we want to make sure that this gets over the finish line from my perspective.
Yep.
I have a question. So has application been made to the revolving loan fund yet?
Not yet, Commissioner. Nope.
Well, Bill knows we had a meeting this morning. There's a couple projects in the works, and
I am aware.
kind of important to make sure, things move
There's
along
money
that
there.
way.
Well, and at least one of them is also very complicated, and
Yeah.
it's going to take a lot of time and analysis, so it'd be good to get an application going pretty quickly on this one.
Thank you both, Commissioners. We wanted to see if there is an appetite from the EDA and from the HRA for their parts, because if there wasn't, the RLF's immaterial. So if I'm getting sort of a thumbs up to go down this track, we will be pushing them in that direction very quickly.
Do you want a motion from the,
I don't need one necessarily. I just want to make sure that we're not barking up the wrong tree and that there's general support to continue down this path.
okay. Nodding heads? Yes?
I'm not seeing any vigorous shaking of the head yet, so.
All right. Signaling, yes.
Okay,
continue.
understood. Will do. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. All right, and then the next agenda item is terminating the shorter option agreement, which is unfortunate, but there's no interest from,
Can't create interest.
Correct. I hate to turn away affordable land opportunities, but I also don't want to put a lot of time and energy into something that may not pay dividends. So I want to formalize it if the board would like to terminate it. I've already committed to the We Connect group, West End Connect, to connect them with Minnesota Power and encourage Minnesota Power to cooperate with them. If they believe they can get housing done there, fantastic. I don't care who builds it.
correct?
We'll take it. So, but I just want to give the board an opportunity to formally decide against it if that was your choice.
Is there, in discussions with the Minnesota Power, do you get the sense that there's a visibility to when some of the other properties that have to go through remediation and might become available for redevelopment?
Commissioner and actually Director Bida can speak to this a little bit too. So, sorry to interrupt your work. My understanding is they have issued RFPs for the decommissioning and demolition of the plant, of the structure itself. That is sort of the domino, so to speak. After that, I believe that would be done in 2024, 2025. They would want to complete it by.
Okay.
So then after that point, they'll be looking more holistically at their property.
Okay.
That's my timeline understanding.
And the demolition of the structure, then also, another component is contamination. That hasn't even begun to,
Correct.
right? So it's a ways down.
Yep. I am, Commissioner, to your point, I'm keenly keeping an eye on it to
Yeah.
understand when that opportunity might come up.
Yep.
And working closely with Director Bide on it too.
But they also own a lot of land that's not under mitigation.
The property,
They own tons of land.
they do, they own quite a bit, especially as you go westward on Kramer. But the issue was that this was already perceived to be too far west or too far away, was some of the feedback we got. So I've talked with them of some of that. The reason the site was selected is because it was fairly flat and it was as close as we could get it to 61 without being in the property that they were not willing to talk about. As I understand it from talking with their representative, they're going to focus on decommissioning and removing the site, the primary site, in concert while they're doing all of that. Well, we'll see what the mitigation is necessary. Remediation, we don't know yet. They don't know yet. Then they'll do some testing and understanding of the remainder of their property. I suspect it's a couple years out before they'd be ready to entertain any serious use. It depends on what they find.
Well, as we mentioned in the last meeting, keep your eye on that Taconite Harbor site.
I am and will, especially if we're able to work with them on a more community-led plan or influence of that new site. Well, new and improved, old and, I'm not sure how to look at it, but the Tac Harbor site, I'll say. So if commissioners are comfortable, if you're comfortable doing so, if you can make a motion to approve the termination of the agreement, then I can proceed.
Absolutely.
I'll move that we terminate the shorter option agreement.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously 4-0. Thank you to Minnesota Power for the opportunity to
Absolutely.
consider.
I'll make sure to thank them for that.
And we want to keep our relationship open with them going
100%.
as we've discussed here. All right. And then we have the proposed meeting dates for 2024, which are the third Wednesdays of the month.
I have one proposed amendment, actually, Chair.
Okay?
That is to the February date. I wanted to check with folks if the 14th, the week before, would work. And that is because of a new item that just came up today.
The 14th.
It's a Wednesday, it's just the
Yep.
week before.
Yep, that works fine.
That's also
It's
the date,
Valentine's Day.
that's also the date of the next revolving loan fund meeting at 8, usually 8 o'clock in the morning. So, just,
off the press.
yeah. it'll
And that's
be-
also the date of the planning commission in here at 4 o'clock.
It's at 4. It's also the date of the council meeting I'll be attending, so apparently that's a very busy day. We could move it, I'll put it this way, we don't have to move it, I like to do it to be clean, but if we, in light of all of that, I don't want to contend with all of that, so maybe we'll just keep it and I can, so, sorry, the reason for the amendment, proposed amendment was, we have potentially another IRRR application for Tofty, for the Temperance project.
I think so.
And
Okay.
we have to have those materials submitted by the 16th.
I'm
But in talking with their staff
not sure
today,
right now.
they said that we could get substantially the stuff in and do the unapproved resolutions and then turn the approved ones in. So I'm just, it's nice to keep it clean,
Right.
but if we don't, if it's gonna be a little juggling, then we can make that work.
Can we approve the resolutions by email? Is it,
I don't believe so, Commissioner. I think we have to, because
Okay.
it's public.
It's public.
okay.
Public resources, so.
If we were a private nonprofit, we could do it, but.
Okay.
Should we change? Yeah. So, you know what?
One question.
Yes, Director Bida.
Just point of order, though, we would have to approve it the 20th, so you could actually apply.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, but I would have an indication from, at least we could submit one resolution that's signed. Again, it's trying to keep it as clean as we can keep it, but
Got it.
Well, perhaps there's some sort of a, this board intends to apply for, talk to us about the Tofty project. We can give you a, not, we can't pass the resolution, but we can make a statement of intent to pass the resolution, right?
we could, sure.
If that-
Although there's no document for that, so,
Well,
It'd be
it's
it'd be
a,
meeting minutes.
right, I can
Yeah.
submit that.
It sounds like they're willing to.
I think that they're willing to understanding the timeline. So I was tempted at noon when I found this out to draft a quick resolution, but I didn't want to add it to the agenda so last minute, just for even the public to be able to know, hey, we're applying for more money. I think maybe just given, I don't want to overcomplicate it, their indication was we could probably make that work. So I'll just leave it at the 21st. I just wanted to see if there was a way, but if it's, that's
Yeah.
fine.
I don't know if things have changed, but in my years of submitting applications to IRRB, I was able to submit the unsigned resolution in the application packet and then forward.
That's what he indicated. We
So-
could do if we needed to.
It sounds like it might be. Commissioner Gabler?
Just a general question. Now, this will be our third application to the IRRR. Is there any feeling for how much money they actually have they're going to allocate and how many other applications they'll get? And then it comes down to the question, if it were up to us of three, do we have a priority? And it seems to me, if we do, it would be helpful to indicate that, because it's unlikely they'll be able to fund everything that's going to be in front of them in this first go-around.
Yes, Commissioner. I think yes, I think is the answer. If you, well, I suppose maybe I'll just jump ahead to address this because we're talking about it now, if that's okay. I was on the phone with the earthwork contractor who is going to be doing the Tofty Temperance Trails in Tofty. He is the now general partner with Grable, who we originally started talking with, which is actually great from my perspective. It means they can, reduce some costs and they are going to be able to control the site development better. They are spending, what is 15 to 20,000 on engineering, civil engineering, actual, work. And right now, they're just very similar to what Bjorkberg's infrastructure costs are. It's about $1 million is the estimate for infrastructure. Of course, the big challenge with this is why there aren't a lot of programs that fund this type of thing. The big challenge with for sale is there's no guarantee you'll sell the houses. Rental projects, you have a building and then you just need to fill up those units. There's a little less, it's still risky, of course. It's just a different kind of risk because you could build all these houses and then nobody buys them. So my point is they reached out today and said, hey, I was so hopeful and surprised when they said that they didn't think they needed any other assistance for the site. I was honestly been crossing my fingers for about 12 months. And then I was not surprised today when they said, hey, we ran some more deep dives. We looked at the geotechnical samples again. There's bedrock 3.5, 4 feet down. It's not so much the foundations for the homes, it's blasting to get the water lines and the sewer lines into the mountain systems. So, unsurprisingly, the assistance we provided them, aside from direct sale, is to provide the land at a significant discount. Fortunately, we're not looking for any other sort of abatement or any other sort of subsidization other than to request IRRR. So I called staff at IRRR today to ask that very question, Commissioner. We already have 2 applications totaling $1,050,000 that we're planning on submitting. This pot of money is $5 million, and it's a pilot. And so I asked, should we be directing this to a different pot that might be eligible for infrastructure? And their direction was, you should apply for housing, and you should submit the application. Right now, as I understand it, there are the total applications that are in the queue, so to speak, for this, I think it's going to be the first week of March now, the meeting for the IRRR board. There are about $1.5 million worth of asks, give or take. So whether, if they decided to not fund 3 in Cook County, from their perspective, this is a good ask because it's in Tofty. So it's spreading, geographically spreading the resources out a little bit, and it's rural versus city community. The last thing I'll say is, so they recommended that we submit it. If they said no because they want to wait and see what else comes in, we could resubmit in June. That's their next board meeting, the same application. And the developer, I told the developer this morning, I didn't want to ask IRRR again. And I said, well, let me call him. And I called him, and then I called him right before I came in here and said, we're going to ask IRRR. And they said, okay. And I'm thinking a $250,000 request is about the gap, and that will get them comfortable with taking the risk. So I want to put it on your radar. Again, I would have done it today, but there just wasn't time to get it to public notice. And my indication from IRRR is there are really 2 communities right now, ourselves and Grand Rapids, who are ready to actually do substantial projects. And they want to show the demand for this money. And I will continue to keep showing them demand if they will fund the projects we ask. So,
Show them demand.
So with regard to prioritization, Commissioner Gabler, I would respectfully recommend that we would prioritize the Heights and Yorkburg, as we've already outlined, and this is sort of a bonus. If they decided to fund a 3rd, fantastic. If they told us they can only comfortable doing 2, then I would say we'll push this back to June and ask again in June. And I've been clear with the developer for Tofty that's the case. So.
Do you need a sense of the board, or is this just a nodding heads okay?
This is, well, I wanted to bring it up, because, again, this happened today. I wanted to bring it up to make sure that folks are comfortable proceeding down that path, and then, get any feedback so that we can pivot if we need to. But that was precipitated by my request to move the board meeting up so that we could put together the application and get an approval for resolution in time to submit for Tofty. But again, we don't need to move the date, so, yeah.
Just a question. So, the common pattern we're running into is that there's cost gaps that are appearing, and all related to kind of the earthworks portion of the projects. And I'm wondering, is that just because that's the portion that we're tending to fund, or is that because earthworks is more subject to these cost gaps? I'm wondering what, or is it just because that happens to be where these projects are chronologically right now? Is it reasonable to expect that as they get further into construction that there will be other cost gaps that appear related to other elements of the projects?
Fair question. Commissioner, one, it just so happens, like, for example, at Switchback Village, that was before the housing grant program existed. Mm-hmm. So we applied specifically for infrastructure. That's why it was an infrastructure application. Similarly with Yorkburg and Tofty, those are for sale. The biggest risk is up front. The biggest gap is the initial cost to develop the site for housing. So if at the end of the day, for example, if they were able to put in the infrastructure and then the company couldn't, like, people didn't want to line up to buy or build new houses, they could still sell those developed lots. We're trying to mitigate so there's 2 different camps, the for sale product, single family, and then the rental product. And they're different funding. There's very few for the infrastructure for sale. Like the IRRR is kind of the only one, the only one we can ask for. Which is why we're going to them for it. And they're getting continued feedback that that's necessary even at the state level because of the cost of utilities. So it just is sort of conveniently aligned that way. But with regard to your other point, as soon as they get the financing to close, then that's on between them and the bank.
Okay.
So once we close on the project deal, if they're over on somebody, either developer eats the cost or the bank agrees to extend an additional loan, like they have to work those terms out. It's very uncommon. It has happened, and there's a couple I can think of in my mind in Duluth, where they start the project and then there are overages sufficient, so they go and ask for additional help. But in this case, that would be much less likely.
Great, that's helpful.
Great question. Any other questions about this?
I have a question or a thought to share that. So you mentioned how we would prioritize the projects for which we're applying, the Heights, Bjorkburg, and then Tofty. And I would suggest having, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, having been around development long enough to know that you never know when any one of those might have a hiccup. So let's not prioritize right now, because a month from now, it could change. So I think we have to prioritize whoever is the most ready or has the least challenges, speed bump, whatever. So I just want to make that clear. That wasn't a final answer for our prioritization of projects, if that's okay.
Yeah, Chair, understood. Maybe I should have, fair enough, I should have put the disclaimer. I think what I'm trying to say is, based on the way that the projects are shaping now,
Yeah.
and based on the conversations and commitments we've already made to these other projects, and understanding that this third project is coming a little bit out of left field and sort of last minute. I mean, the project's been under the way for a long time, but this particular ask, the gap that's been identified is, I don't know, 4 hours old.
Yeah.
So I agree with you. If there's something changes with the projects and one seems to be more likely or something falls, we should readjust. As things stand now, that's my recommendation, to prioritize them in that order, and in particular because the developer of Tofty said if we have to wait till June, we could start construction in June or July and get in the ground and such, because of the modular nature of the build.
Yeah. Okay.
And also, I would say one last thing is, we don't, I think that makes sense, never mind. Does that help at all? Like, I don't think that things will change materially, and if they do. The other thing, frankly, is it would have to be, we don't get to make a choice on which project we want funded the most. The reality is, IRRR staff would come to us and say, hey, we feel like these two are stronger, because the board ultimately is going to make a decision at the board meeting. But if staff comes to us and asks if we have, one that's more pressing or another, then we'd have that opportunity to quote unquote prioritize. I wasn't planning on saying any priority for any of them until we get feedback from IRRR staff. And if we do get that question, I'm more than happy. I'll come back to the board and say, hey, this is the situation. Is that comfortable?
Yeah. I just wanted to make sure that that didn't sound to the public like this is what we said and this is what it is, because we don't know that.
Things might change, in other words.
Thank you.
One other question, my understanding is that the Heights project is also applying to IRRR.
Correct.
And is it in coordination with HRA, or what's the HRA's role in that?
We're doing the application.
We're doing the application, okay, so that's.
Yes,
So
we're
I
very
guess-
fortunate the EDA is cooperating. So anything that's housing related, the HRA is doing the application. We're just doing it through the EDA.
Got it.
And the EDA. And which leads to one other quick comment about IRRR. In my conversation with staff today at IRRR, they indicated that they're rethinking their single entity requirement for Cook County because of this housing program. They think it makes much more sense, and I agree, to have an HRA apply for housing funds if they want to. But that wasn't definitive, so at the risk, to make sure that we're just going to keep moving forward, we're going to do the normal process, and then in subsequent rounds, we would consider changing that. I would love to not have to have Teresa and the EDA do redundantly approve all of these resolutions, but we'll do what we have to.
Yep.
Until they change it.
Yep.
Any other questions about that? Okay.
So, we've discussed the Tofty project, and we've discussed keeping the 2024 meeting dates as they were.
Correct.
No change for the February meeting, then we're okay with that. Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
All right, the next thing on the agenda is the election of officers.
Is there a process for this? or
I
do
don't
we-
know, this is the,
Or we just?
this could be the first time that we've, other than the original election of officers, this is the first time that we're having another election.
Well, for the
Can I-
sake
can I-
of,
can I, can I make a motion that we retain the current slate?
that's what I was gonna say. I'll second that. See how quickly
Thank
we
you.
get
I
that
would
in.
like to just point out, though, we don't have a treasurer. And that's becoming a little more important focus now. And we should at least be considering someone being officially a treasurer now. I did volunteer to do the QuickBooks stuff, but that's not, I'm not volunteering to be the treasurer. But I do think, just as a corporate entity, that's an important thing to be, to have. And
So the current slate is, I'm the president, Bill is the vice president. Are
Chris
you
is the secretary, I
Yeah,
think.
I think so.
the secretary?
Can you combine the secretary and treasurer position?
I wonder, I don't know if it's good to have a sibling of the bookkeeper be the treasurer of the board.
We'll double your salary.
Definitely.
Darn it. That might be.
Yeah.
There might be a little
So upsetting.
finding by the auditor
Yeah,
there about.
Books look great.
Right.
Perhaps
Chris, are you
Commissioner
willing to
O'Brien
serve?
would step down as
That's fine.
secretary and
That's fine.
step up as
Or
treasurer.
just, you can be two, the secretary
you could do
and,
two,
typically
yeah.
a secretary and treasurer can be the same
Yeah.
person.
That's, well, the secretary has not been a heavy lift so far, so.
Right, because you don't, right, it's a kind of a figurehead thing. You make sure that Jason does
All
the
the power, no
minutes,
other
right?
responsibility.
No, I had to really work.
So, Chair, if I heard folks correctly, you would remain chair. Commissioner Gabler would be stuck as vice chair. Chair of vices, I think, is what you said last
Chair
time.
of vice, and it's in charge of vice.
And then Commissioner O'Brien would be secretary and treasurer. And I indicated we would double his salary. The two rules.
He should amend his
Commissioner
motion.
O'Brien does have two shoulders, so
Should be a motion.
he can handle
Yep,
it.
no, I'm not making, I just want to make sure we're clear about what the motion would be. So, thank you, Commissioner. If you're going to make the motion, we have to amend it to include your new title.
That's fine.
And the
And I'll amend my
second,
second, yes. In agreement?
all right, any further discussion?
That's quite proper, but good enough.
Please, we're formally informal,
Yeah.
informally formal. We're following Robert's rules to the best of our understanding. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 4-0.
Thank you all for your services. Except for you, Commissioner Hanson. You get
Yes.
that.
I'd just like to point out, I've completely refrained from making snide comments about my brother. It's taken some effort. Jokes.
Okay, well, we're gonna move on to the director's report. Future project sustainability. Oh, is that the energy thing?
Correct, but we do.
Oh, okay.
Commissioner, would you like to do that now or? you-
I'll do that as a commissioner item.
Okay, I want to make sure it was on the agenda, but
Okay.
we'll have Commissioner O'Brien address it later.
So we'll move that down. The Heights, the tax abatement request in February.
There we go.
Yes, Chair. I've been obviously informed the board that we're going to be taking this tack. I just met with City Administrator Roth before this. We have a standing meeting. So we're going to be coming to the county board. The target right now is February 13th, I think, is the Tuesday. And then February 14th is the city council meeting. This is in support of the Heights 36-unit project. We are fortunate to have the interest. This was corroborated, frankly, by the IRRR today, that they're kind of, in their terms, they said that they are kind of dumbfounded that we're able to, that we have as much interest in projects as we do. So I feel very fortunate about that, because other communities aren't having that, and rural communities are not having that success. Having said that, we're running out of ARPA monies and other funds, so we have to figure out creatively how to get these things done. So I have sent over a draft tax abatement agreement for the city's review. The county has their own form and document, and I've been working with Administrator Yorkie on that as well. I'm also waiting to hear back from elders. They're doing a pro forma analysis and review of the Heights to make a recommendation on what the gap is and what the appropriate term of an abatement would be. And then we'll incorporate that into the agreements. But if the plan right now is to go to those boards, board and council, the 13th and 14th. And if any commissioners are able to and so inclined to come and support it, be most appreciated. In addition, the Heights will have a variance request that's going before Planning Commission on the 7th, a height variance. So we've had many conversations about this. I have certainly since I've started the community about height and what's appropriate, not appropriate, and how we navigate that. And this will be a good test case to see what folks think. So if folks are also inclined, I would be delighted to have folks. I will be there on the 7th in support as an HRA.
Is that a 5:15?
5:15
on the 7th?
Yep.
So remind me of the meetings?
The variance application is on the 7th at 5:15 in City Council chambers. City Council is the 13th. I believe that's at 6:30. I think it's 6:30, right?
The
Yeah.
City
Council.
The City Council is on the 14th. The County Board is on the 13th.
I'm sorry, yep, I apologize. 13th is County
County
Board.
Board.
Thank you.
At 8:30 in the
8:30.
morning.
And then, yeah, apologies. 14th is City Council. And I believe that's at 6:30.
It's a great thing to do at 6:30 on Valentine's Day.
I will happily be there. So feel free to attend any of those riveting meetings as you can. Obviously, your support is very appreciated. Just to give you context, by the way, for the height request, the variance request, the proposed building, the Heights, which, I mean, maybe it's too aptly named if we're going for a height variance.
Heights.
I should probably rebrand that. The lower, yeah, right. The basement. Actually, the reason that the height, there are two predominant reasons that the height variance is being requested. One is because they're trying to incorporate underground parking. And from a product perspective, and from, I guess, my perspective, that's a wonderful asset to have for tenants, especially wintertime for seniors to be able to use the elevator, park safely on the heated parking and go up. There aren't any of those, to my knowledge, in Cook County.
The Grand Marais condominium building
Yep, sorry, mark it right up, the apartments.
was built before there was a
Height.
ordinance.
Restriction.
Yep.
And I believe that one actually is 40 feet. The Howard Hedstrom had given me the measurements for that. Anyway, the garage, because of how the site grades and where the measurement's taken from, some of the basement will be exposed, and so it's a flat roof. So we're obviously trying to keep the height down. So actually 3 reasons. One's the garage. 2 is the floor height or ceiling height's proposed to be 9 feet, which just feels better from a product perspective and being inside. And the 3rd is they're trying to account for solar installation on the top of the building, which adds obviously a couple feet. So the total variance, I believe, request will be approximately 8 feet, and it's a 3-story structure. I've talked with administrators and counselors and commissioners, and Commissioner Hawkins knows this. 3 stories is tough at 35 feet. A lot of the time, it can be done. It's very tight in this case because, again, the slope and the underground parking, you can't do both of them. So the developer's going to ask for that variance. We will see what commission and then council says if it gets to council. And if it's rejected, we'll have to go back and make some changes and see if we can't figure it out.
And at least the city council meeting will be contingent upon approval at the planning commission.
Maybe.
If the planning commission doesn't approve it, the project won't go.
If the planning commission doesn't approve it, well, there's still a gap, but the amounts might change a little bit. So,
But for the height,
yep. My point was, so if they ask for the height variance and the planning commission says no, then from my perspective, they'll have to remove the garage, and they might have to do 8 foot. My understanding is, no matter what they do, they will need a variance of at least, call it a foot.
oh.
So if they remove the garages, they remove the solar, they do the shortening of the height, floor heights, they still can't stay in that 35 feet. My point is 35 feet is very difficult. Anyway, and that's with the flat roof. So they're asking for the best project they want to build, the variance to accommodate that. If the plan commission says no, then they'll have to reassess and, remove some of those factors. So it will probably impact the gap level, but we'll figure that out.
So, what time is the variance, planning commission meeting?
5:15.
5:15.
On the 7th.
The 7th?
Yeah.
I can tell you, in my judgment, I don't think it'll be even at the higher height visible from the lake, based
Yeah.
on other things that are there. And
Right.
my extended time out on the lake, I don't think that'll be an issue anyway.
I agree with you, Commissioner. I looked at the site. They have some massing they're working on too to share with planning commission, so you can see the building on the site as it is now. Obviously, it's not like walking out and seeing it, but it's the best you can do without having built the thing. The other thing is there's nobody behind them that they're really blocking the views of. So from a view shed perspective, there's not a neighbor that's like right behind them that has lovely lake views that now doesn't. And that's, you don't say no to a project for one person, but you shouldn't anyway. But there are a variety of reasons that I have found, as just talking with Commissioner Roth about this, this community, right, wrong, or otherwise, there are a lot of folks that have very strong opinions about height, especially as you get closer to the lake, but they're also concerned about the hillside height. And one, I just say for the record, the switchback project accommodated that and didn't want to ask for a variance request, and there's a $750,000 gap. And most of it's because of earthwork and site conditions. So there's a sort of trade-off that we have to continue to wrestle with to get these over the finish line. So we're gonna see.
I'd also like to disclose that I'm not yet, but I will soon be a shareholder in the Cook County Cook County Community Real Estate Fund.
And I am as well. And
In this process.
and I'm also head of the task force that's looking at the energy systems that are going into that building, that are planned for that building.
Because we are a small community,
Yeah, we are.
and we all have our fingers in every single pie we can reach, right? It's good. It's very good. We have passionate, dedicated people doing good work.
And I have one pie, and it's the HRA, which is fortunate I'm not involved with anything else because it's too close.
There's no time.
There's no
Intended benefit
even if
if you're
I-
not living here.
Yeah. Well, I have found in this line of work, I don't go on boards. I don't do a lot of
Right.
anything because it's just too easy to run up against stuff.
Yeah.
So that's the
Very
heights.
good.
I want to make you aware of those things.
Okay.
It's, like I said, all last fall, the first quarter of 2024 is going to be a fast one. So we have a lot to come in. The next, just to be quick on these last two items, these should be quick. St. Louis County Days are the 6th and 7th of March. We went last year as a sort of tour de force of Cook County. I was going to say storm the Capitol. That's not a good phrase anymore. We did not storm the Capitol. We went invited. They actually welcomed us.
You continued the tradition of
Yes, thank
legislative
you. Yes,
visits.
exactly, yes. And I wanted to I talked with Director Linda Jurek from the Chamber, with her Chamber hat on. It sounds like there's not a effort to coalesce around campaign to go down there this year, in part because this year's a very different type of funding year than last year. The state has made it pretty clear that it's going to be a lot tighter, and I mean, we just don't have the giant surplus we did last year. So, from my understanding, Director Jurek was going to get back to myself and I believe Director Bida about a potential calendar, but right now they were not planning on going down.
The Chamber's not planning to go?
Correct. That's my understanding. Nobody in Cook County, as I understand it, was planning on. Commissioner Sullivan might be going down. But last year, there was a whole crew of folks that went in two different teams and talked with senators and representatives. So I asked in a meeting with her this week, they're planning that again, and there was no plan for yet. So I want to bring that up. And I am planning, if the board is all right with it, with going down. NARO is the HRA organization for the state and for the country. And they have a day at the Capitol on the 28th.
Great.
It's a great chance to talk about some policymakers with the head of the Housing Committee and such. So I'm intending on doing that. Did you want to go, Chair? Did St. Louis? I see a consternation on your face.
Well, I'm not sure what other kinds of conversations are being had about legislative priorities in the county. I think we might have one. We may have discussed one just a little bit earlier here today, having to do with the special legislation. But I'm not going to talk about that because it would be premature. So, to be continued.
Fair enough. That's all I know at this point. I just wanted to let you know. I had not heard, last year there was a scrambling of calendars and agendas and meetings, and I was quiet. It was suspiciously quiet, so I asked, and that was why.
Yeah, it's been, we've sent a delegation to the Capitol every year for 7 years, 8 years, 10 years, many years. So it's an interesting change of, which is fine. I'm not a part of the chamber, and I'm not here to say what the chamber should do, but we might want to have our own conversation about.
One thing that I should have added, Chair, is that in talking with the chamber, one of the reasons that the director gave is that last year there were several priorities that we were trying to get on the radar and in statute. And this year, really, the predominant one from the chamber's point of view is the transfer station. And so there's not a litany of requests that we're making this year, so they didn't feel like, and our senator and representative that represent us know that's the priority, so they didn't know if it was worthwhile. So that's what, just relaying that. The last thing on my list is simply that I mentioned this earlier, we had that initiative that I've talked with the board about several times. So it was called 1% for housing, and that was confusing with the 1% tax for lodging. So this is, I've been working with Steve Surbaugh on this, and Cascade has again been contributing those funds faithfully for, I don't know, almost a year. Mm-hmm. We've rebranded it the Cook County Housing Initiative. We have a nice pithy logo. And the thought here was, and I believe Director Bida mentioned this at the EDA yesterday, the $200,000 that they're proposing to assist as a construction loan for Switchback, we would, once that's reimbursed, we would use that as seed funds to go into this Cook County Housing Initiative so that we can continue to revolve it. So our plan is to make a sort of housing-specific fund here for Cook County that we could do a mix of gap funding loans like the ones we're talking about, the ones that keep coming up, and or grants, and do some combination and to have our own fund. And we're planning on using those EDA funds as well as the money CVR, and as we go to talk to others, that other businesses would contribute voluntarily for this fund. So I just wanted to answer any questions or just put that back on your radar. Like, it took a little while. We had some other things to work through, and now we don't want to lose sight of it, and we're continuing that conversation.
Very good. Commissioner
I
Gaylor?
mentioned it at the last meeting, but it seems like it would be appropriate to recognize what Steve Surbaugh has done and CVR, because I think the last figure I saw, they were up to 20,000 some hundred bucks that they've already raised through their own individual efforts, and at least a letter acknowledging that, or some kind of a public praise, I don't know what, but it just seems like appropriate. It starts leading me down the path to a Housing Hero Award from the HRA, but that I just bring it up because I think we really ought to recognize what Steve has done. It's remarkable to me.
It is.
I agree, Commissioner. How do you feel about, I've been kind of chewing on that too. And frankly, because Steve has also been championing this, has been very open to working with me on this, and he doesn't have to. I was thinking about when we sort of officially, once the funding is, if the funding is approved by the EDA, and we were making it clear that it's seed money for this, that I'd be very happy to publicly thank Steve and CVR in whatever form you would like to. I just wonder if there's a time to do it when we sort of roll this out formally, and kind of thanks to Steve and CVR for their making this possible, sort of thing. But I'm open to whatever you think makes sense.
Which is another one of those dual roles in the community as the partner in CVR and the president of the EDA board, and the sources coming together. It's a beautiful thing. And yes, I think we should, maybe in the short term, if you could just send them an email that we all.
I have done that. After our conversation
After
last time.
last month
I
you
wrote
did do
Steve and
that?
said my board wanted to make sure you understood how appreciative we are.
Good.
But if we want to do something more formal as we roll this out, I'd be very open to doing that too.
We need more creative minds than mine working on that, but, yeah.
Well, it seems like maybe when we, as Jason said, as we move along, that might be a great milestone moment to celebrate and memorialize.
And you mentioned there's a
Easy for me
snappy
to say.
logo now available, and
There's
is
a what's that?
a snappy logo now available for
Yes.
the effort? And has that been unveiled? If it hasn't, that might be the time to, have us formally recognize the efforts.
It has not been unveiled. I again solicited the expensive services of my wife to come up with a logo,
I kind of smelled that coming,
Yeah.
but that's all right.
which meant just making dinner a couple of times. It was worth the investment. And I can show you, I have not unveiled it, as you said, Cook County Housing Initiative. Well, I'll find it here and then I can show you, Chair, but I don't know if you want to continue on that. I don't want to make folks
Okay.
wait here as I look here.
So the next thing is whether the director has other topics, but we'll skip past that right now. And I'll ask if there are any committee reports.
Well, the Finance Committee was overwhelmed by other obligations over the holidays, and we have no report at this point. We're happy that the budget's been approved by the county board and that we're moving forward into 2024, but that's our report
Okay,
for the time being.
I will quickly show
so
this.
you can pass around that, yeah.
Nope. Great,
Very nice.
that's cool.
Trying to get the various types of housing that are
Is that
And the
under 35 feet?
It's like 5 stories.
no comment.
It's bigger than the Sawtooth Mountain.
This is in the outlying county, so you don't have to worry about it. Planning Commission of Grand Marais.
I'm pretty sure it'll be less controversial than the new state flag.
Yes, that's been very interesting to watch as well.
In a year, nobody will even remember the old one.
I was gonna.
Okay, did you have other topics under
There was
your-
one other thing that just escapes me. I apologize. So we can go to commissioner items if you like, or
Okay.
committee reports.
All right, we did committee reports. I don't think there's any other committee reports. And then commissioner items, and we have Commissioner O'Brien following up on the energy discussion.
Yeah, so just to excuse me, to refresh, last month we had talked about the interest in having some sort of a process to at least have transparency and to what sort of decisions are being made regarding the sustainability and energy efficiency of some of the projects that are going forward. To that end, Jason put me in touch with an engineering firm based in Duluth, Windsor Engineering. We've had several back and forths with them about what sort of support they could provide. One idea, and no decision made yet, but one idea is that a good basis for comparing different energy options is to do a computer model of a building's projected energy performance, and then you can more easily swap out, say, well, if you went with this heat pump instead of that, it would, or put solar on it. It makes it much easier to do sort of what-if scenarios. It also makes it easier to apply for some federal level incentives. So one thought was that we might have and that type of modeling is typically out of reach for most developers. They don't have that capability in-house. So one of the topics we had with Windsor was whether they could do that kind of building modeling for some of the projects in our portfolio. I'd say that that there's the conversation's ongoing. So I think that's. But one way or another, I think that we're continuing to sort of gestate on ideas for how we could, at a minimum, provide more visibility to the decisions that are being made. I mean, the good news is that many more efficient technologies have become mainstream now, so it's not controversial to spec in LED lights for all buildings, and it's not it's becoming less controversial to spec in heat pumps instead of gas furnaces. And so, so a lot of good things are happening in the market as it is. I think the challenge we have is that we don't have an enforceable efficiency code. So really, and so we're really going to, it's a, we have limited leverage to have the developers spend more money or accept a lower return on their project for the sake of higher, better environmental performance. So our goal is to, a win-win would be if there's areas where there's money being left on the table because they could apply for, they could use technologies that there are incentives for, and it would be a net zero, and then we could help work with them to get those incorporated. Anyway, so that long-winded way of saying that we've been doing a fair bit of research on how we might set up a process to do that more effectively, but no answers yet. So I can
Thank you for your
report
work
back,
on that.
I'd just say the importance of this was highlighted last meeting by Commissioner Hanson, that the impact on operating costs is what, is the trade-off of your upfront investment in the building itself. And if you read the latest letter from Arrowhead Electric Co-op, it certainly got my attention with our own family budget as to where we're going to be putting more money. And you think about that, it's one thing, but thinking about it as apartments that are to be rented to low and moderate income people, it becomes a more important value statement for me anyway. And I think let's just keep moving along in some direction here that would be helpful.
I don't even think about it as an environmental issue. I just think about it as a long-term cost issue.
Yep.
Just to quickly corroborate Commissioner O'Brien, thank you, Commissioner Gabler and Commissioner Hanson. I completely agree. The challenge that we're identifying is how do we get enough data that shows a sort of apples-to-apples comparison of upfront cost and long-term savings, and make it compelling enough to get them to get on board. And a lot of it depends on their financing structure and talk about terminal value and things. We just want to make sure that they're not missing opportunities that they might be interested in. And I'm also personally, in having this conversation with developers, trying to get some hard data to give them and say, hey, look, it might cost you 5% more upfront, or whatever the number is, but in 10 years, this is what your returns look like, or your reduced expenses look like. I just haven't found yet a good data set to use.
Yeah,
That's out there. And
I think there is. I think one of the challenges is often that in many of the units that we're proposing, the utilities are actually metered separately for each apartment, and so the savings are realized by the tenants, which is great, but the investment is made by the building owners, and so you need to find a compelling way to convince the property investors that there is long-term value in properties that have lower operating costs, and that's where you alluded to the terminal value. But yeah, it's not a slam dunk argument. So.
Would it be worth a conversation with Arrowhead Electric Co-op about this, so that, they seem to have some smaller programs that help people, and they're pushing electric energy, obviously, left and right, and talk to them about,
It's a good idea.
can they contribute to this effort with us?
we should have the same conversation with
Assembly.
the Grand Marais PUC,
Yeah.
which I also sit on, full
Yeah.
disclosure. But
Yep.
those are good organizations to
Yeah.
bring those resources, because if you can bring resources, if it's a good idea and you can bring resources to a developer, they're going to take it.
And the advantage of both of those co-ops is that they're members of networks of co-ops across the state, and so this is, we're not the
With
only.
expertise.
Yeah,
Right.
they have this expertise and experience in other communities that might be helpful.
So far, most of the projects, obviously the bigger projects we're working on are in city limits. And so I have sat in meetings and connected the developers with SIMPA and worked with Shane Steele at the city in their office to try to make sure that they're at least aware of those resources. And some of those conversations have borne fruit. But more to come, obviously, as Commissioner O'Brien said. We just want to make sure we kind of have a good handle on what modeling could produce and how we package it, I guess.
And if not modeling it, there's another way to just have some sort of a report required by the developers as to what are what is the plan for building envelope, what's the plan for HVAC, what's the, then we at least got something that we can have a conversation about.
I would love to be able to get that report and then match make and say, here, have you thought about this, have you thought about this?
Right.
Have you thought about this? But I own that I'm trying to catch up on the Inflation Reduction Act nuances, and I'm not all up to speed on the programs that come out, because they seem to come out every month.
Yeah, it's recent, that's the thing, so.
So I'm hopeful to get
Need
more
to stay on
educated on
top
that.
of it.
Exactly.
Yep.
Chair, I did remember, unless there's anything else about the other topics item was, I will be meeting with Lloyd K. Johnson Foundation in the office next week for an on-site visit on Wednesday about that $50,000 grant application. So just, I'll keep the board apprised, but we're meeting to just talk about it.
Excellent.
Yet another disclosure.
Yeah.
My wife
Oh,
said
that's
something. And I serve on some
You
committees.
made that one last time.
Oh.
You should get involved in your community.
Stays at my house, sit down.
All right. Well, any other, I'm going to just go around commissioner items. Commissioner Sullivan.
I do have a couple of things. There is a group of commissioners that will be going to the Capitol on February 20th through 22nd. And we will be there, obviously supporting the transfer station. We've had numerous conversations about that, and also looking at our own bonding. And I had a conversation with Representative Scraba and also Senator Hochschild last week. They are planning to come to Cook County in a situation very similar to what we had last February. And they are looking at coming on a Friday in March. They have not identified yet the date, but they are interested in talking to organizations and groups. So I have already penciled in the HRA.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Just thinking that there might be a great opportunity to speak with them. But anyway, as soon as that date is identified, I'll make sure to let you know.
Thank you. Commissioner Hopkins. I don't have anything to report. Commissioner Hanson.
Nothing.
Commissioner O'Brien.
Nothing additional.
Adam Gabler.
No, thanks.
Somnus? No, nothing from me. Jason?
There's always something. We'll get to it. I'm sure I'm missing something. Another time.
All right then, if there is no other business for the board this afternoon, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll move adjournment.
And a second.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We stand adjourned.
Thank you.
Well done.
Why is it those are always the fastest motions to make?
Oh, yeah.